This is TWiT.
So Jony Ive and Greg Christie apparently didn't quite see eye to eye. Christie is out. Ive, of course, still there. Christie joined Apple back in 1996. He's been there 18 years. He worked on the Newton. When Jobs came back, he cleared out a lot of people, but not Greg Christie. He is listed as the inventor on nearly 100 patents, has 31 pending patents right now. Worked on software design, is widely credited as the co-inventor of Slide to Unlock. Sources at Apple say after 18 years at the company, Greg's decided to retire and cash in his shares, which is probably at this point worth quite a bit of money. Apple said Greg's been planning to retire later this year after nearly 20 years at Apple. It's not quite 20 years yet. It'll be 20 years in 2 years. He's made vital contributions to Apple products across the board and built a world-class human interface team which has worked closely with Jony for many years. He did testify in the Apple-Samsung trial last week in San Jose about Slide to Unlock, gave interviews about the process of designing the iPhone to the Wall Street Journal and NPR. So it's hard to say. You know, 9 to 5 Mac said it's following friction between top Apple Human Interface Vice President Greg Christie and Senior Vice President Jony Ive. Apple's hardware and software design is being dramatically shaken up. Ive, of course, has always been responsible for hardware design, but this is seen by some as a consolidation of his power in software as well.
Well, he already has the power in software. I don't think that this is as patent place-ish as people are making it out to be. Gruber used his sources to look into it, and he agrees this just seems to be a case of someone who's been at the same job for 20 years. And sometimes you wake up in the morning and realize that, wait a minute, how many tens of millions of dollars do I have? Why am I going to work in the morning? That sometimes you're just ready to move on and do other things. That's what it looks like. I don't think any other company provokes so much speculation that anytime someone moves in or someone moves out, that's because there's a knife in someone else's back.
It's interesting, too, because I heard about this, I think, when I was out there for Macworld, and it announced it internally at Apple weeks prior to that. It was a well-known thing. It wasn't public, but it was a well-known thing. And like Henri Lamoureux, like Baz Olding, there's a bunch of people who've been at Apple for a really long time. And these are the people who basically, by force of will, got the iPhone to market. And they are tired, and they have to testify, and they have families who would dearly love to spend more time with their money. And it's just... there's so much incentive for them just to want to take a break. That there might well have been friction. I mean, WWDC last year, he did the introduction for the interface talk, but he did not do the interface talk, and it's not the general style of design that he has historically done. So it might just be, you know, all things considered, this is his point. This is a very graceful point of exit for him.
Yeah.
I've heard that this is a common story from a lot of really big companies and really big creative companies, where you'd wonder, gee, why would if you got a job at of really great creative responsibility at ILM or Disney or Pixar, why wouldn't you stay there for the rest of your career? And the thing is, a lot of these jobs attract the sort of people who get restless if they're faced with the same creative problems and the same challenges for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, because you have the sort of mind that you can, like Bill Atkinson, who spent years developing software, and now he wants to do photography because this is the lane that their brain is taking them down.
Yeah, I mean, in that light, it makes a lot of sense. But it's also, you can see, I mean, both things might be true. You can see Jony Ive saying, hey, this is where we're going to go with software. Maybe it doesn't fit what Greg Christie felt. I mean, clearly, if he's been there 18 years, he has a lot to do with the original look of the iPhone, not the, you know, an iOS 7 may be a very big departure for him. So all in all, yeah, and he's got some money, and he'd like to enjoy his family, and God knows, doing the iPhone's exhausting, right?
Organizationally, it makes a lot of sense, too. Organizationally, it makes a lot of sense, too, because previously, even though Jony Ive was put in charge of all human interface, Greg Christie's department still reported to Craig Federighi, and Jony would basically come and sit in on their meetings and give input, and it just wasn't the sort of pipeline. You wanted to have that track underneath Jony Ive the same way you had industrial design under Jony Ive, and now, at least organizationally, it makes a lot more sense as well.
Yeah.
It's an interesting. I don't think that this is a result of a fight that wound up one person winning, the other person going home. Nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the interfaces of everything that Apple makes over the past 2 or 3 years as Jony Ive gets more and more control over more and more aspects of the things. Where there are few people to really talk to. Not that anything at Apple is ever one person deciding this is the way that we're doing things, but clearly we're moving towards a place where I think that Apple's user interface design is going to be turning into more like the vision of a specific director, so to speak, where it's not just lots of different products with a common sort of design language, and it clearly came out of the same factory and the same foundries. Now we're talking about here is a small group of people who have a specific vision of what's best for humans and computers, and being able to consistently apply that one vision. So that's a great thing, because Apple has always been tops of the heap in terms of making things that work together very, very well, and making sure that if you buy a brand new product that you've never used before, the fact that it came out of that same foundry, that same shop, means that you're probably going to be 75% familiar with how to operate it. But as I was thinking about this the other day, that it's not what Apple's design direction. It isn't like, if you're going to compare it to directors, it's not like Scorsese or Spielberg, where there's a certain fingerprint on it, but it's kind of generic enough that it doesn't overwhelm how you come and approach the story and come and approach the product. I think that Apple's design has been getting a little bit more towards Wes Anderson or David Lynch, where it's not as extreme as that, but it's definitely a point of view, and there's no way getting around that specific point of view. And so if you don't like that point of view of minimalist, take away as much detail as possible, make as quiet an experience as they can possibly put into pixel forms, if you don't agree with that, well, you're kind of stuck, because that really is the emphatic statement being made on every single device that they make. So I've never been so eager to see a new version of macOS as I am right now.
This one thing we know for sure is that, or maybe we don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but according to 9 to 5 Mac, that means all software designers, instead of working under Director of Engineering Craig Federighi, now work under Jony Ive directly with his industrial design team.
That's my understanding as well.
So that's a significant change. And
if you think about, like, 5 years ago, Steve Jobs had a general idea what he wanted, and the design team could make him 20 versions of a texture, and Scott Forstall could say, these are the 3 that Steve will like, and then Steve will choose one of those. And that entire process doesn't exist anymore. So Apple has to realign, whether Jony Ive is the auteur now at Apple or not. That simple, Steve Jobs, Scott Forstall paradigm doesn't exist anymore. So other things have to change around it.
So is Jony, I would guess that Johnny's taking that role then, the Steve Jobs role. That is the one we're going to do, right? I mean, I don't think they're bringing it to Tim Cook and saying, Tim, what do you think?
I don't think the impression that I get, and again, my sources inside are not nearly as good as many other commenters, but the impression that I get is that there's nobody who has settled into the Steve Jobs role at Apple. That really this has been there's a group mind that's more powerful than any one single mind.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
You agree? Okay. I know nothing. You guys know more than I do, so.
Well, they have really talented people, and they tend to. If you look at Jony Ives when he still does industrial design, they prototype everything. They sit down, they discuss it, they try to get to the essential nature of it. It's a very procedural thing, and I think the same will carry. My guess is that the same will carry over to human interface.